Homecoming queen wave.
Yeah, please do your homecoming queen wave. All
I
right,
wasn't
so,
actually homecoming queen though.
oh, you should have been.
I'm
Awesome. A lot of people are logged in, so we'll get going. I am super excited about this webinar, even more excited that you have agreed to do this. So for everybody tuning in, me and Annette have been following each other for a few years now. We are involved in a lot of the similar stuff. We care a lot about firefighter mental health, and we care a lot about firefighter physical health. And I think both of us have come to discover that they're interconnected. You can't truly be great at one without being great at the other. And something that both of us have recently discovered is how sleep impacts both of these. And with poor sleep, your hormones get out of whack, your ability to recover is out of whack. But what was even more surprising in the last year that I've learned is how sleep impacts your mental health. And it's insane to learn that poor sleep is tied to every single psychiatric illness and increases the risks of suffering from things like depression, PTSD, and unfortunately, they found that insomnia creates like a 300% greater risk of dying by suicide. So sleep is extremely important. So I saw the background that you guys see now. Annette had shared it. She was creating this PowerPoint, and I sent her a message, and I was like, hey, any chance you can do this for our peer support team? And she agreed to. So I'm super grateful for this. So for those of you online who do not know Annette, she is a 16-year veteran of the fire service. She holds the rank of lieutenant and also owns FireSQFitness, a coaching business dedicated to the physical and mental health and wellness of firefighters worldwide. She earned her master's degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. Why are you a firefighter?
Long story.
And then she also has several credentials in basically PT training and whatnot. I don't know what all of these stand for, so I'm not going to read them. But she's a precision nutrition level 1 coach, and she's certified through the Society of Neurosports and the International Society of Sports Nutrition. She was recently also named to the Illinois Senate Task Force focused on mitigating first responder suicide. She teaches for the University of Denver in the graduate program for sport coaching and is a proud member of the panel of experts that recently reviewed and revised the TSAC practitioner course for the NSCA. I don't know what that is, but she'll tell us. And she is a highly sought after instructor. She's done a lot of podcasts, and she's connected with so many superpowers out there. So Annette, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dina. I appreciate this opportunity, and thanks North Carolina Peer Support. And if you really want to know that whole story about why the biochemist is a firefighter, go ahead and tune in to Behind the Shield episode 365, I think it was. I tell this story. But after the talk today, if you would like to reach out, if you need to contact me, if you want to have some banter, absolutely do so. The easiest way to reach me is to message me on Instagram, and I'm the same handle across all 3, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at FireSQFitness. Or you can message me. There's a chat feature on my website, so you can do that as well. So some of you may not have actually been born when this movie came out. I was in high school. I'm really embarrassed to admit, but this is Kiefer Sutherland from the movie The Lost Boys, and their motto was sleep all day, party all night, never grow old, never die. It's fun to be a vampire. But we as humans cannot survive this way. Although we'd like to think we're superheroes, we're absolutely not. We are just plain old humans, and we need sleep. It's absolutely critical. I'll tell you all about why later, but first, there's a couple of causes of insufficient sleep. Dina mentioned the sleep disorders, including insomnia, sleep apnea, and narcolepsy, but the one that I think that affects our firefighters even more are lifestyle-related sleep disorders. So the irregular schedules, the stress, the lack of discipline. So a lot of people say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And I was just talking to my friend Nate Palin yesterday. And Nate is a recently reformed sleeper. When I first met him, he was not sleeping at all. But Nate says, I can sleep, or you can sleep when you're dead, but you can't do much else. So I'd like to remind you that surviving is not the same thing as thriving, and not being dead is not the same thing as kicking ass. I use a basically an advisory board for fact checking on all of my presentations if I'm not a subject matter expert in the field. So basically, if it's not biochemistry, nutrition, or strength and conditioning, I use a subject matter expert. And my sleep expert is Dr. Allison Brager. And Dina knows she is one of the coolest humans on the planet. She is not only a neuroscientist, she has a PhD in neuroscience. She's a published author. She is a major in the US Army, and she has recently been accepted to the astronaut program. So Allison's probably going to space. So we have the coolest sleep expert in the world. So here's just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. I want you to understand the importance of sleep in tactical professionals. So tactical, that term, tactical professionals, refers to police, fire, military, and EMS personnel. So firefighters are tactical professionals. We're going to examine sleep architecture a little bit. Sleep is an active, not a passive process, and so we need to look at that architecture. And then we're going to learn how to apply sleep hygiene, or those processes that make us able to sleep with better quality and quantity. So I have a whole lot of bad news coming at you hard and fast. The first one is that the total direct and indirect costs of sleep deprivation and sleep disorders in the United States is in the billions of dollars. In fact, in the United States, it's about $411 billion a year, followed by China, which is about $138 billion per year. On an annual basis, the United States loses 1.23 million working days due to sleep deprivation or sleep disorders. And so this is either absenteeism or what they call presenteeism. Your body is there, but your mind is not. So we're losing 1.23 million working days. Not cool. Excuse me. Goodness gracious. Okay, sleep deprivation is linked to a higher mortality risk. We're actually 13% more likely to die when we don't sleep sufficiently. So an individual that sleeps less than 6 hours per night has a 10% higher risk of dying than someone sleeping 7 to 9 hours per night. And an individual sleeping 6 to 7 hours has a 4% higher mortality risk. So 7 to 9 hours is kind of the sweet spot when we're talking about sleep. And finally, insufficient sleep has been found to be correlated to a lot of leading causes of death. First of all, 7 of the 15 leading causes of death, including cardiovascular disease, cancer, cerebrovascular disease, diabetes, and septicemia, amongst others. So besides impairing our health and well-being, it's also been connected to cognitive performance issues, including some major accidents, including the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, the 3 Mile Island disaster, the Exxon Valdez spill, and the Space Shuttle Challenger tragedy. All of these things were directly correlated to sleep deprivation. So let's just do a quick review of all of the bad news I've given you so far. Performance and cognitive defects or deficits, motor vehicle crashes and other injuries, impact on our functioning and our quality of life, and chronic diseases, including obesity in both adults and children, diabetes or impaired glucose tolerance, cardiovascular disease and hypertension, anxiety symptoms, depression, and use of alcohol. A lot of bad news. Sorry, folks, but I have more. In a study done in the University of Chicago, just 5 nights of sleep deprivation of 5 hours. So basically they took healthy college males and they sleep deprived them, gave them only 5 hours for 5 nights, decreased their testosterone by 15%. But who cares, right? That's other people. That's not firefighters. Wrong. The greatest killers of firefighters include heart attacks and motor vehicle accidents after suicide. And so the leading cause of death in both volunteers and full-time firefighters is heart attacks. The second leading cause of death in volunteers is motor vehicle crashes, and the third leading cause of death in full-time firefighters is motor vehicle crashes. Sleep deprivation is an independent risk factor for both of those things. So in one study, unfortunately, 37% of firefighters screened positive for a sleep disorder, including sleep apnea, insomnia, or shift work disorder, or restless leg syndrome, which these are all considered sleep disorders. So take note, 37 screened positive, and they weren't aware that they had a sleep disorder. That's not good news. Also, sleep disordered public servants are 24% more likely to experience an occupational injury. Bad news just keeps coming. And as Dina mentioned in the intro, sleep deprivation is strongly correlated to PTSD and depression, which are predictors of suicide. So remember, the greatest killers of firefighters are suicide, heart attacks, and motor vehicle accidents. Sleep deprivation is independently linked to all three. But wait, there's more. 24-hour shift work increases cardiometabolic disorders and mental health disorders, and chronic sleep restriction, sleep disorders, and circadian disturbances are thought to also exacerbate those issues. So just when you thought things couldn't get worse. In one study, more than 80% of firefighters who screened positive for sleep disorders were undiagnosed and untreated. So this problem is rampant. It's causing huge issues, but most of our firefighters are undiagnosed and untreated. So therefore, I would have a very strong recommendation for a yearly screening in addition to our physicals, in addition to our fitness testing, in addition to our mandatory training that we have every year. I would strongly suggest that we sleep screen our firefighters. A lot of the topics I talk about, people think, oh, that's really cool, that's really fun, and they never apply it. While sleeping as little as possible and grinding through your life is not an admirable quality anymore, we know better. In contemporary society, we can't function this way. It's no longer okay to sleep or to joke, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like Nate Palin said, you can sleep when you're dead, but you can't do much else. So that's not a great thing. So again, let's learn how to apply this information, and let's learn how to improve our lives with what we're going to learn today. Sleeping can improve your outlook, your mental health, your physical attributes, your relationships, your performance on the fire ground or other job, your intimacy, hint, hint, you know what I'm talking about there, and your lifespan, among other things. So I'm going to tell you today, absent any other changes, if you will sleep better in terms of quality and quantity, everything else gets better. Everything, I promise. So why do we sleep, in fact? And Dina and I were just talking about this book offline before we started. It's called Why We Sleep. It's a great book. It's a relatively easy read. I would recommend it for everyone. But basically, briefly, sleep produces a very complex neurochemical bath that improves our brains while we sleep in various ways. It basically restocks the armory of our immune system. It helps us fight malignancy, helps us prevent infection, parentheses, COVID, and it helps us ward off all manner of sicknesses. So in other words, sleep greatly enhances our evolutionary fitness. And that's a quote from the author of the book, Why We Sleep. I love to talk about studies, so let's talk about another one. One chronic sleep deprivation week yields immediate, short-term compromises in brain health at all levels, including neuroconnectivity, endocrine, and molecular signaling cascades, as well as your psychological and behavioral outcomes. That's 1 week of sleep deprivation. While we're sleeping, we are literally taking out the trash. And in another study, one 24-hour period of sleep deprivation increased our markers of tau and amyloid plaque, which are the gold standard markers for Alzheimer's and dementia, and brain inflammation. And even after people recovered from this sleep deprivation challenge, so to speak, these levels of markers never returned to baseline. They improved, but they never went back down to baseline. So there are immediate and clinical increases in catabolic processes such as cortisol release and oxidative stress. So I know we think we go to work, we stay up all night, it's just one night of sleep, we'll grind through, it's no big deal. It's a big deal. It really is a big deal. Also, extended sleep deprivation starts to adjust our metabolism of glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids, amongst other substrates. So we're actually changing our metabolism by sleep deprivation. I know, I'm just so full of great news. Aren't you glad you had me, Dina? So we also need to keep in mind that at the molecular level, at the genetic level, we can modify our DNA and therefore our expression of proteins in many, many ways. And sleep deprivation is one of those ways. Nutrition is another way. Even our thought processes can help modify this DNA at the genetic level. But sleep deprivation is a very powerful modifier of DNA. Also, one single night of sleep deprivation, you know how you stay up, you stay up till 11 in the firehouse, you roll into bed at 11:30, the tones drop at 12 for a structure fire, you're out till 5, you maybe get a total of a half hour sleep. You know how hard it is to make good decisions the next day and not choose the donut, waffle, sandwich thing with the peanut butter and jelly in the middle? You know how hard it is? That's your brain. You make poor decisions when you're sleep deprived, and the hunger hormone ghrelin secreted in your stomach goes into overdrive. So your brain is literally telling you, eat the crap. Not great. Finally, I shouldn't say finally, there's a lot more bad news. In a study done in police officers, there were heightened blood markers of inflammation, so increased white counts, lymphocytes, and monocytes, which led directly to sex-specific cancers, including prostate and breast. And their schedules really aren't that different than ours. Also, to keep in mind, memory consolidation and sorting of trauma occurs while we're sleeping. So if we don't sleep effectively, we don't consolidate and sort our trauma effectively. Sorry, all bad news. Okay, the public health consequences of sleep loss and sleep disorders are far from benign. I hope I've impressed that upon you. The visible consequences, such as errors in judgment contributing to disastrous events like the Space Shuttle Challenger, those are pretty clear. The less visible consequences of sleep deprivation are far more prevalent, and they take a toll on our lives in a really strong way. Mortality, morbidity, performance, accidents, and injuries. All of those things are true. But the other things, such as obesity and hypertension, these develop much more insidiously along a long career path. And so those things kind of sneak up on you. So after decades of research, I think I can confidently make the case that sleep deprivation, sleep loss, and sleep disorders have a very profound and widespread effect on humans. We could probably drop the mic right there. So let's talk about sleep, because I learned about sleep in high school, and I remember them drilling into my head the importance of REM sleep. And as it turns out, although REM sleep is important, it is not the most important sleep. So let's talk about sleep architecture. Two types of sleep. There's the non-REM sleep and the REM sleep. And I have a fancy chart for us to look at. But basically, during sleep, our brain continuously cycles through these different types of sleep. And each type of sleep has different characteristics. And it's very, very interesting. If you're awakened during certain points of your sleep cycle, you're going to be much more able to respond intelligently to an alarm or to an EMS call than other portions of your sleep cycle. Have you ever been awakened at the firehouse and you literally don't know where you are, can't remember which rig you're on, and you don't know where the frequent flyer's house is because you just can't even function at that moment? You were probably awakened during your N3 portion of your sleep cycle. But again, during sleep, you repeatedly cycle through N1, N2, N3, and REM sleep. As you sleep, the time amount you spend in REM sleep through the night gets a little bit longer throughout the night. And everyone always asks, how much time do I spend in REM sleep, or should I spend in REM sleep? Most adults around 25%. But also interesting, newborn babies spend around 80% of their time in REM sleep. Infants and toddlers spend around 50% in REM sleep. And the older we get, the less time we spend in REM sleep. Scientists aren't super sure what the function of REM sleep is yet, but just know that there's less of it as we get older. So let's kind of go through these sleep cycles and then we'll move on. In N1 sleep, it's when you're transitioning from being awake to beginning to become drowsy. You don't spend an awful lot of time in N1 sleep. Usually it's about 5 to 10 minutes. And during this stage, your heart rate and your breathing slow a little bit. It's a relatively light type of sleep. Your eyes are moving and your muscles start to relax. Your body temperature starts to decrease and your brain waves start to slow down. It's really easy to wake someone up from an N1 sleep, and they might not even realize that they are sleeping. So when you have your lunch, lay down in the chairs for your, mandatory after lunch nap, and the tones go off just a couple minutes later, you might not even know you were sleeping, even though you were sleeping. So again, easy to wake you up. During the N1 sleep, that's also where you may experience those hypnic jerks or feeling like you're falling off of a building and landing on the ground. That's very, very common. And it's just that falling sensation. And again, those are pretty much they only happen in N1 sleep. N1 represents only about 5% of total sleep time. After that, you transition into N2, which is also a light sleep. People spend more time in N2 than any other sleep stage, about 55% of their time. After that, you're hopping into N3. N3 is a very important sleep stage. It's known as slow wave or delta sleep. The brain waves are very, very slow. You spend more time in your N3 sleep in the first half of the night than the second half of the night. Someone awakened from N3 sleep is not going to know what's going on. They're very difficult to awaken, and that's going to be that situation where tones go off and you don't know what your name is. Generally, that's the N3 sleep. People feel groggy if they're awakened during this time. And that's why if you are going to take a nap, it's generally better to keep your nap around 30 minutes or less so that you don't get into that N3 sleep stage, or conversely, take it to a full sleep stage, which is around 90 minutes, so you can cycle through all 4. So again, your muscles are relaxing, your breathing's slowing, your blood pressure's going down, your heart rate's going down, everything is relaxing during N3 sleep. This is also the time when sleepwalking and sleep talking are the most common. Time spent in N3 sleep decreases steadily, and the older you get, the less N3 sleep that you get. So adults typically spend around 15% of their time in the sleep stage. And then finally, the only sleep stage I ever learned about in high school is REM sleep. And typically it lasts about 10 minutes. It gets progressively shorter throughout the night. Your eyes are moving rapidly. Arm and leg muscles tend to be very, very relaxed at this point. And it's hypothesized that perhaps this keeps us from acting out our dreams, because this is the time when we are generally actively dreaming. So again, I think I mentioned a newborn spends around 80% of their time in REM sleep. And then as we get older, only around 20 to 25% of our time in our sleep. So in case you don't like charts, here's a nice little infographic about the 4 stages of sleep. But again, remember, you're transitioning N1, N2, N3, and into REM throughout the night. And most adults are having around 5 of these sleep cycles per night. So let's talk a little bit about the circadian rhythm. As humans, we evolved to sleep at night when it was dark. We really didn't have a choice. We couldn't, go work the night shift at the corner grocery during caveman time. It got dark, we went to sleep. It got light, we woke up. And evolutionarily, we secrete hormones at certain times during the day and during the night that put us to sleep and wake us up. Now, here's the unfortunate fact of the matter. Many mood disorders are often associated with disrupted circadian clock schedules. And there's our sleep and our cortisol secretion and our melatonin secretion get skewed. And then unfortunately, night shift work, exposure to artificial light, both of these things can precipitate and exacerbate these symptoms in susceptible individuals. So again, remember, we evolved to sleep at night. We didn't evolve to stay up all night playing video games and then sleep all day like the vampires. It just doesn't work that way. Also, additionally, during the 70s and 80s, there was some great pioneering research that highlighted the connection between circadian rhythm disruption, sleep timing, and poor outcomes for mental health. So, shift work. We all participate in shift work, and unfortunately, shift work disrupts our circadian rhythm and also leads us to many complaints of insomnia, excessive sleepiness, and all of these things result from hours that are worked during when we should be sleeping. So during shifts, these people, or during life, these people are experiencing irritability and negative social consequences. I'm here to tell you that I lost a decade of my life due to irritability and negative social consequences due to unresolved shift work issues. So also to remember is that since 2007, shift work has been designated as a 2A carcinogen. What that means is there's strong evidence in rodents that shift work or shift work studies causes cancer. And so this hasn't been demonstrated strongly in humans yet. That's why it's called a 2A carcinogen, but there is sufficient evidence in lab animals for that designation. Why? We think it's due to that chronic inflammation that we discussed earlier, that same chronic inflammation that causes the tau and amyloid plaques in the brain and the increased white cells in the police officers and the prostate and the breast cancer. So, sleep deprivation leads to impaired cognition, which leads to bad decisions, which leads to not good things happening on the fire ground. It leads to an increased all-cause death by about 13%. It leads to increased mental health issues and complications. It leads to a decreased sex drive, and I'll cite again that study of the decreased testosterone, the University of Chicago study. And it also leads to weight gain due to poor glucose control, poor decision making, and that ghrelin, that hormone, hunger hormone secretion. Oh, this looks like me some nights at the firehouse. But sleep deprivation, again, to drive this home, increased risk of injury, reduced pain threshold, a greater occurrence of illness, reduced psychological and physical performance, increased anxiety, irritability, and mistakes. In caps, impaired situational awareness, increased body fat percentage, and also in caps, poor judgment of distance, time, and speed. These things affect firefighters in a profound and serious fashion. In the Army, in one study, for every hour of sleep lost, their combat effectiveness decreased by 15 to 25%. And by the time they got to 4 hours, they were only at 15% combat effectiveness. And I wish I was doing this live so I could do my little survey and have people raise hands, but how many hours of sleep do you think the Army has as their current standard minimum sleep? I'll tell you, 4 hours. And we know that they are 15% combat effective at 4 hours. Wow. So in another study, longer nighttime sleeping correlated with increased motivation, better cognitive processing, and just overall better outcomes than those who slept for shorter duration. That's kind of like duh, right? You sleep better, you perform better. But collectively, these studies, along with one that I'm going to talk about in collegiate basketball players in the next slide, kind of lead us to believe that we can bank sleep. We were told for years that, you know, once sleep is gone, you can never get it back. You can't pay back your sleep debt. But this research indicates that we can perhaps bank our sleep. And if we do that prior to our missions or our 24-hour shifts, we may perform better on shift. So let's talk about some sleep myths. First of all, it was always thought that you cannot get too much sleep, but actually, we talked about this earlier in the presentation, that 7 to 9 hours is the sweet spot. Those that sleep less than 7 or more than 9 actually suffer from some of the same issues. So morbidity, mortality, mental health disorders, all of those things that we mentioned earlier. So it's those wide ends of the sleep distribution pattern that give us the issues. So 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Also, many people think that they can function on way less sleep. And I'm not going to say that they're liars, but they're liars. There's a very small portion of people that are genetically predisposed and able to function on less than 7 to 9 hours of sleep. It's a very, very small part of the population or proportion of the population. Naps are bad. That's another myth that has been perpetuated. The only time naps are bad are when naps interfere with your sleep at night. So naps can be very effective, as well as banking sleep, which I told you about. So naps and banking sleep can be effective for performance and alertness. In a study done in collegiate basketball players, they gave them 2 hours extra of sleep for a few nights prior to sleep depriving them. And they actually performed statistically better in their sprint times and their shooting accuracies, the ones that banked their sleep. And so, sort of playing off this, the US Army actually is a fan of banking sleep prior to times of what they call frantic operational tempos. So the Army is really great at that banking of sleep and then judicious use of caffeine to get better performance out of their soldiers. Finally, alcohol helps you sleep. Every firefighter I've ever talked to has told me that alcohol helps them sleep. It's actually not true. If you are able to effectively fall asleep and stay asleep, usually it's the staying asleep that is the problem. Even if you are able to fall asleep and stay asleep, your autonomic nervous system recharge when you have had alcohol prior to sleep is abysmal. So alcohol is not a good option to help you sleep. So let's hit some sleep disorders. Sleep apnea is very concerning for me. Sleep apnea is the involuntary cessation of breathing, and there's a couple of different types of sleep apnea. The one that we usually think of is obstructive sleep apnea, and that's when the tissues of the soft palate and the throat relax to the point where they close off your ability to breathe. And so you become deprived of oxygen for a short amount of time, or some people actually for a long amount of time. So those soft tissues relax and shut off your ability to breathe. And generally, these people with obstructive sleep apnea do snore. There's also something called central sleep apnea, where your brain doesn't send the message to your respiratory system to breathe. And these people actually may not snore at all. So in central sleep apnea, message doesn't get from here to respiratory system, and it's the same effect. They don't breathe, but they may not snore. And then there's what's called mixed, where the brain actually doesn't send the message to the respiratory system, but the respiratory system still relaxes and obstructs the airway. So these people may snore. So interesting though, really, really interesting and scary. In the military, there was a study done on obstructive sleep apnea, because who typically are people with obstructive sleep apnea? There are people with big, large BMIs, large, meaty necks, older, and male. That's typically our people with obstructive sleep apnea. But in a study done in the military, the people that were suffering from sleep apnea were of normal BMI and much younger. And so this leads me to believe that many of our firefighters may be suffering from sleep apnea more than we would predict in the general population. So we have probably many of them that suffer from sleep apnea due to the BMI and due to the other things, but I would guess that many of our younger firefighters of normal weight are also suffering from sleep apnea. Oh, let me go back to sleep disorders and mental health. As previously mentioned by both Dina and by me during this presentation, PTSD and depression are largely driven by sleep deprivation and sleep disorders. And so it is imperative that we get our firefighters sleeping better. So I've given you a lot of problems. I don't like to bring you the problems without bringing you the solutions. So let's talk a bit about sleep hygiene, and then we'll move on from there. Biggest, best thing that you can do for yourself is to realize that you are not a 2-year-old on Halloween candy. You have a responsibility to go to sleep. And just like anything else in life, if you leave it to chance, it's not going to happen. So much like when you run into your friend at the gas station and you say, oh, hey, we should get together for lunch sometime. And then you run into them 8 months later and say the same crap to them every time, and you never get together for lunch because you didn't sit down and make a plan. The same thing happens with our sleep. You need to be responsible and create a routine for yourself and create a bedtime and create a time to get up. So first thing to do, set a consistent wake up time and set a consistent go to bed time. And again, 7 to 9 hours is our sweet spot for sleep. If you're currently getting 4, it's going to be a hard stretch to go from 4 to 7. So what we need to do is start intentionally increasing your sleep time by just a few minutes each night as you can. So if you currently go to bed at 2 in the morning and get up at 6, all right, let's back that truck up to 1:45, and then keep backing that truck up until you're giving yourself that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Other things that you can do, limit the use of your electronic devices. They all emit blue light, which is basically light pollution. It interferes with your melatonin secretion. It interferes with your thought processes. Limit your devices, ideally 2 hours before bed. There's not many people that are going to be able to do that. So if you really must use your electronic devices before bed, make sure you invest in a pair of blue light blocking glasses, and then just really try to be judicious with your use of devices. Limit this consumption of substances that impair your sleep. So not only alcohol, but also caffeine and nicotine. So alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, make sure to cut those things off prior to going to sleep. It has been shown that exercise can help improve your sleep. You just have to be careful when you do that exercise. If we go all the way back to our circadian rhythm chart, your best power and performance and all of those things are from about noon to 4. And so if you can take advantage of that circadian rhythm exercise time, you will be done far in advance of bedtime. It shouldn't interfere with your sleep. And then finally, there are some supplements that may assist you with your sleeping. Magnesium is one of them. It's involved in 300 enzymatic processes in your body, but it's likely helpful in your relaxation. And then I'll hit on it a little bit later, but there's also a couple of meditation type apps that can help you sleep. The other thing, I didn't put it on the slide, but many people experience better sleep if they have a high protein, moderate carbohydrate, I hate the word snack, it reminds me of 2-year-olds, but snack before bedtime. So something like a Greek yogurt and some fruit or something similar helps many people sleep very well. So I have another really bad one that you're not gonna like. Kick the dog out of your bed. You cannot sleep well when there is a dog in your bed. I don't know how many people have contacted me about their poor sleep, and the first question I ask is about their dog. Oh yeah, we have 4 dogs that sleep with us in our bed. Oy vey, kick the dog out. One more thing, there in a few studies, it's not super compelling, but electromagnetic frequencies may irritate some people in terms of their sleep. So the whole house Wi-Fi, shut it off. Having the phone right next to your bed, things like that are just small steps that you can take to help potentially improve your sleep. All right, we're coming down to the end of this. This is what I call my miscellany slide. The things that I want to hit are caffeine, obstructive sleep apnea and firefighters, I kind of hit on that already, sleep-wake cycles over the lifespan, and then sleep as an immunity booster. First things first, I already told you that caffeine, judicious use of caffeine in the military helps improve their operational readiness. However, drinking caffeine 24/7, 365 at dosages out of this world is not going to help anyone. If you have to wake yourself up with caffeine, if you have to have caffeine at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because you're crashing, I would maybe suggest to take a look at your sleep. So again, caffeine can be a great performance enhancer in many ways, but it's not a good substitute for sleep. Also, side note, I didn't even intend to talk on this, but side note, I, Annette Zapp, do not drink coffee. I don't like it. I think it's gross. It stinks. However, coffee actually, I know Dina's like, no way, girl, you're off my webinar. Coffee actually has a lot of health benefits to it. It is not just happy brown liquid. There's a lot of nutraceuticals, I guess we could call it that, involved in coffee. So coffee is actually a great choice for your caffeine consumption. Probably not the one with the whipped cream and the chocolate in it and that kind of stuff, but black coffee is a great choice. Energy drinks, however, are a slippery slope, and here's why. This first came to light when Allison was talking to me about it. This is a study done in the military. Energy drinks people that drink energy drinks tend to drink them excessively. So not just a energy drink during the day, but 4, 5, 6 energy drinks. A Monster has 200 milligrams of caffeine, which is actually about the top limit of how much caffeine you would want to have at a time. But a Bang energy drink has 300 milligrams of caffeine. So too much caffeine. But the military is over consuming these energy drinks. They're crashing in the afternoon, so they continue to overconsume the energy drinks. But what they're also finding is that the energy drinks are exacerbating issues of PTSD and anxiety. That's my not good face. Okay, so real careful with the energy drinks, please and thanks. Sleep-wake cycles, they change as we grow older. But that whole myth of we don't need as much sleep when we get older isn't really true. We need quality sleep as we get older, so don't fall into that pitfall. I already addressed the obstructive sleep apnea in firefighters. Remember, 80% of firefighters with a sleep disorder are undiagnosed and untreated. And then finally, my little portion down here on the right is just sleep is a great immunity booster. And especially during this challenging time with a novel virus, you know, this is not going to be the last novel virus we see in our lifetime. We need to take advantage of every weapon we have to fight the coronavirus, and sleep is a huge, huge weapon in keeping you healthy. So, however, so we talked about the judicious use of caffeine. I kind of gave you my lecture on that. Just remember, bottom line, 200 milligrams of caffeine every 4 to 6 hours is kind of your top limit of dosage. And then you want to stop your caffeine consumption probably 4 hours before you're trying to go to sleep. So many of these people that are having trouble sleeping, it may be due to their caffeine consumption. Also be careful of Bang energy, not hating, but kind of hating. And then finally, creatine, my favorite molecule in the world. Creatine is magic. I love it so much, but there is emerging research that use of creatine can help bolster your performance during times of sleep deprivation. How? Not quite sure how yet. It could be just simply providing energy, ATP to the brain. Don't know how, but stay tuned. Hopefully more to come on creatine. So I would like to encourage you to basically do what you can with what you have where you are. Many of you right now are saying, oh, but I have a toddler at home. I'm getting a divorce. My house is really busy. I'm doing 48s. Do what you can with what you have where you are. Prioritize your sleep. Absent that, there are 3 other aspects of health and wellness that can really bolster your mental health in big ways. The first one is nutrition. The data is compelling. People that eat healthy diets have less mental health challenges. Hello, this is a fruit, vegetable, nice to meet you. How about a steak or a piece of chicken instead of McDonald's mystery meat? That's the type of nutrition I'm talking about. Healthy, wholesome, whole foods help bolster your mental health. Number 2, mindfulness. Mindfulness can include things as simple as breathing, yoga, gratitude, stretching. Back to breathing. Breathing literally resets your autonomic nervous system. That whole take 10 breaths before you say anything that my grandma told me, that's no lie. It resets your autonomic nervous system. It can also be yoga. It can be all manner of things, but mindfulness is super important. And then the last one is movement. Exercise matters, and that can be as simple as stretching, walking, powerlifting, CrossFit. It doesn't matter. Movement matters, and it bolsters your mental health, and it's super important. So because I gave you that sort of bonus information about nutrition, mindfulness, and movement, I wanted to give you some resources of people that I really, really trust with this stuff. First off, sleep, back to sleep. Met Jacqueline a couple years ago at Illinois Firefighter Peer Support Symposium. She's amazing. FirstResponderSleepRecovery.com. She does Nidra Yoga, which is approved by the Department of Defense to help people sleep. Amazing, amazing. Check out Jacqueline. Also Insight Timer and Headspace with people who can't shut their brains off at night. Fabulous resources, and at least Headspace, you get 12 free before you have to pay. I'm super cheap, so that was fun. My dear friend Wendy Lund from Canada owns and operates Wealth Management, which is a mindfulness-based company, and she actually has a free course online for first responders and their families, so check it out. Dietitians, super, super important for nutrition. Maureen Stocklin and Megan Lautz both specialize in tactical athlete nutrition. And then finally, coaches specializing in tactical athletes include my coach, Hunter Schurer, and then my good friend, Chris Marilla. Both of them are amazing. And so message me because I couldn't fit all the contact information on here. So I'm going to give you my contact information again in case you want to screenshot that. And then we will move on to any questions that anyone might have.
Awesome job, Annette. I can't believe you're able to put all of that information in 50 minutes. That was absolutely incredible.
Information vomit, that's what I do.
I know you did it so well, and you were so entertaining the entire time. That was fantastic. Hey, Sam Nichols asked, do you recommend regularly supplementing with creatine? If so, do you like a specific brand?
Love this question. Okay, so just remember the emerging evidence on creatine and sleep deprivation is still a little bit out there, but yes, creatine is the most widely studied, well-supported supplement ever. It's super inexpensive, and it is great for muscle accretion. It's good for your bone. It's good for helping with mild traumatic brain injuries. There's also some emergent evidence in women. I mean, creatine is like awesome. I mean, it can't do for you what you're not doing for yourself, but it's amazing. 5 grams per day, taken either with protein or a carbohydrate. So a perfect time to take it is with your protein shake after you work out. There's no need to load it like when it first came out, there was this loading phase, 20 grams a day for 30, whatever it was. No need, 5 grams a day, every day, without fail. Work out, don't work out, doesn't matter. 5 grams a day, every day. Brand doesn't really matter. I use Now, NOW. It's nice and cheap, but get creatine monohydrate. Everything else just does the same thing, and it's more expensive.
Awesome. Do you see who just logged in as a panelist?
Hi, Jacqueline. I can barely see her though.
I know she's hiding from us in her, there we go. Yeah, she's off.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
Jacqueline probably doesn't have heat. It's okay.
I'm at the gym actually right now. So how you guys doing?
Awesome. She tuned in for the whole webinar, which is really cool. I'm glad. Perfect timing to log in because Megan asks, she first says, awesome presentation. And she says, any tips for improving sleep when you're at work at a busy station?
I'm gonna give one tip and then punt this to Jacqueline because she has great tips. The thing that people forget is that if you go to bed earlier, you have more time or more chance to get sleep. So there's this perception of, oh, I'll just stay up till midnight because we're going to get calls anyway. Well, you could have got 4 hours of sleep between 8 and midnight. So that's my big thing. Go to sleep. But Jacqueline has better tips than that.
Okay, can you guys see me too? Yes, see my sweatiness.
Beautiful.
Well, I think it's such an awesome collective effort to spread this message. I'm super passionate about sleep. I mean, this is just like lighting up my heart and soul. So thank you, Annette. Thank you, Dina. And I think I would just mention, Annette, you had put on the slide Insight Timer. It is actually a free app, although there is an upgraded version for more offerings. But if you want to download the Insight Timer app, you have access to a lot of different mindfulness practices. That said, not all mindfulness practices are any good. Some of them are complete crap. So I would highly recommend really finding a great instructor who does yoga nidra. I have some practices on there. If you want to DM me, I can send you a practice for free. I'll give you the link. And what yoga nidra is, you might be like, what is nidra? Nidra is an ancient language, Sanskrit word from India. Nidra means sleep, and it is a sleep-based meditation. So what you do is you lay down on your back, you simply close your eyes, and you follow along. And it activates different sensory parts of the brain, which help move your body from the sympathetic nervous system state of the heightened stress from the day into the parasympathetic state. So it's very sequential. A lot of recordings claim that they're yoga nidra. I've studied it for 15 years, I'm telling you. They're not real yoga nidras. So I've been very, very diligent about sharing that, and I will direct you to good instructors. Dr. Richard Miller with the Department of Defense, I've studied with him. He's got great recordings, more directed for PTSD. My recordings are more tailored for just unwinding, getting the busy mind to calm so you can enter deep sleep. And one study actually out of University of Copenhagen, a hospital out there, they did PET scans on people who were listening to yoga nidra, and they found that people who regularly practiced were actually able to enter the delta brainwave sleep within 30 to 45 minutes. And normally that takes over an hour, 60 to 70 minutes in your first sleep cycle. So this is literally a tool that will help you drop in, have more efficient sleep, and feel more restored. And there's so many more studies I could share, but I think that's the main one, is practice yoga nidra. All you have to do is listen with one earbud. You could still hear the tones going off and follow along. You can DM me and I'll send you guys a link to my yoga nidras for first responders. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you logged in, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
I recently went to a busier firehouse, and I guess it was perfect timing that Dr. Walker's book came out, and then Allison Brager did a webinar with Behind the Shield, and she gave some good advice, and I've kind of implemented both of their tips. So something Dr. Walker said was, if you are going to be up all night, he recommends taking a nap late in the afternoon, like 7 p.m., get a full 90-minute cycle if you can. I've tried to, like you said, Annette, try to go to bed earlier. And then something else I started doing is as soon as I get home from work, I don't schedule anything right away. I get 90 minutes as soon as I get home from work. And for me, I feel like that helps a little bit. It at least gives me one full cycle of sleep.
Dina, I love how you said late afternoon, 7 o'clock. I'm like, oh my God, that's almost bedtime.
Yeah.
I go to bed at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, and you know, I noticed that. So we were stationed with another busy firehouse for a little while, and one of the girls there, she went to bed every night at 7:30, and I thought it was crazy at first. I'm like, you're gonna get a call at 11 and be miserable. But then what I noticed happening was she was getting a full 3.5 or 4 hours of sleep that I wasn't getting because I was staying up. So I've started trying to do that as well. So Amanda has a longer question, and I'm glad both of y'all are here to help answer it. So she says, we know that decreased sleep can increase cardiovascular risk. We also understand that high volume, sudden onset tones can increase that risk at night. What have you seen with tone effects on heart rate and that return to quality sleep or increase in that further cardiovascular risks? Is there any way to mitigate that? Basically mitigate the tones.
Well, I think that a few years ago, at least within the last 15 years, they kind of came out with the heart saver tones, the quiet ramping up tones that are a little bit more gentle. And I would hope that all firehouses are taking advantage of those tones. I hope. Jacqueline may know because she visits a lot of them. But the other thing is there are some gentle ways to wake up in terms of lighting and things like that as well. So the problem is these things cost money, and a lot of fire departments don't want to spend money. But definitely the old harsh tones should be way out of there for sure.
Jacqueline.
Yeah, is Sean on there? Is my husband somewhere? He could answer that, but I know for a cheap implementation,
yeah,
I know.
There he is.
Yeah. Do you want to tell him about like your cheapo install with the red paneling on station 20? Because red, if you could just even get like
let me start my video. There we go. Yeah, so it's one of the first things that we implemented in my own firehouse was just to invest our own money in changing the color of the lights. That kind of plays into the blue spectrum light in optimizing the quality of your hormone production for optimal sleep. And we essentially did that by replacing the drop lights that come on when we get a call with either red light bulbs, or if they're fluorescent lights that we couldn't get in red, we bought cheap red film to cover those lights so that the lights that come on at night are only red lights, which has a minimal impact on hormone disruption affecting sleep. Then the other thing that we have that's really nice is we went to a tone system for a little while where we were toning out all of our calls, and it became incredibly problematic for us, especially because for the longest time our department has only used tones for confirmed structure fires, and then overnight one day they decided we're going to use audible tones for every call that we dispatch. And Jacqueline actually ended up doing some research and wrote an article called Sound Off, Why Firehouses Should Use No Tones. And that article made its way up the chain of command to our administration, and they got rid of the tone system altogether. So now instead of using tones, which are really audibly disruptive, we were able to get dispatch to stop using the tones and only use lights in a verbal dispatch. And that was kind of a way for us to mitigate that problem with no financial implication to the department, because they didn't have to modify the system to one of these fancier soft wake up type systems, but instead they just stopped initiating an audible tone prior to a verbal dispatch.
Have you noticed that the deep sleepers have a harder time waking up without?
No, in fact, most of the guys that I talk to, guys and gals that I talk to, tend to say it's the lights that wake us up first. So most of us will wake up to the lights turning on before we even hear the tones. But that audible dispatch is still loud enough and disruptive enough at night. It's a big enough change in what we're doing while we're sleeping that we rarely have anybody actually sleep through a call and have to go wake them up.
Nice. So Wayne Bailey, he wants to know if you think fire departments will ever go to 8-hour shifts due to lack of sleep.
No, and here's why. I mean, we could, but then we would be in the same issue that we are with police officers, which are those officers that work that overnight shift have the extreme issues of shift work disorder, so on and so forth. So I don't think that it's ever going to happen. And I think that would also involve hiring more staff in order to cover those shifts. So I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know. What do you think, Dina?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So I think it's a terrible idea because everything that we've learned is that being up at night is terrible. So being on a permanent night shift is really bad. So if you do go to 8-hour shifts, you're going to be having, you know, a third of your workforce up all night, and that's really unhealthy. So I definitely prefer the idea of us improving sleep hygiene for our 24-hour shifts and understanding if you're at a busy firehouse, you need to get a good sleep cycle early evening instead of late afternoon, or you know, you've got to stop scheduling, you know, work the day after work. And if you're going to be up all night, as soon as you get home, get a 90-minute sleep cycle. Like, we have to figure out how to work with what we have, because no matter what, we're going to be responding overnight. Jacqueline, what do you think?
I'm sending the group a link so you guys have it. And I checked out for a minute, so I apologize.
It's all right.
I think the other thing that we
So sorry, I will respond to that. So I feel like since emergencies come at all times of days, there's no good schedule. I mean, at the end of the day, is that like the most simple answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Like
other thing that I would say is that unfortunately, the only thing worse than working nights is working rotating. And you know, in the fire service, they would have to make it fair so that, you know, you would be working days 1 month and then afternoons and then nights. And so you would probably be consistently changing over and over. So I think all in all, I think it's not going to happen, and it probably shouldn't happen.
Yeah, if we understand that, and I think like you and I mean, Jacqueline's been talking about sleep before talking about sleep was cool. And you and I have really picked up on this in the last couple of years. And I hope that it means the rest of emergency services are going to pick on it and understanding. You know, I remember 10 years ago, the talk of a nap was like, are you crazy? Like, why would you take a nap? And now we recognize just how important naps are. And I love how Allison Brager talks about tactical napping. So there's a difference between, you know, banking sleep and getting that 90-minute cycle before being up all night, and getting a tactical nap if you need a little extra energy because you had poor sleep the night before. She says, drink a little bit of caffeine and lay down for 20 minutes. And then you'll wake up before you get in that deep sleep, and that caffeine will kick in and get to moving.
She calls it a nappuccino. I think it's hilarious.
Oh, nappuccino. I love that.
Hey guys, I'm gonna lose service here in the locker room. Thanks so much for what you're doing, and you guys have a great day.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jacqueline.
Jacqueline, thanks for tuning in. For everybody still
I'll still be on if you guys have any other questions for us.
Oh, perfect. First responder sleep recovery, right?
Yes, that's correct.
On Instagram, Facebook, and wherever. But yeah, Jacqueline and Sean are like the resident experts in the fire service, so it's pretty exciting getting to bring her on. Sean, you've disappeared, so we don't see your pretty face. But so that looks like the questions have.
I'm still here. I just lost my video.
There you are. So it looks like the questions have slowed down. Annette, you legit like covered so much wonderful information in such a short period of time. Do you guys have any remarks you want to give? Any closing thoughts?
Okay, so before I realized that training firefighters was the most logical thing for me to do, I tried to be everyone's everything. So I trained hockey players, and I trained bikini competitors, and I trained them all. But I will tell every single one of those athletes the same thing, which is, if you sleep better, everything gets better. If you don't sleep, really nothing that you do is going to bring you to that level of performance and mental health and wellness. So just sleep, okay? Just sleep. That's the bottom line.
Do you recall when Dr. Walker talked about practice makes perfect, but sleep plus practice truly makes perfect?
I love practicing sleep.
Yeah, but he discussed, like, if you're preparing for like a, you know, some sort of recital, if you're preparing for a test, it's actually counterproductive to lose sleep while studying, because you actually need sleep to integrate those memories, whether it's like a promotional test, so you're studying a bunch of books, or it's a tactical test where you're like doing a piano recital, or you're studying a skill. Without the adequate sleep, in addition to the studying preparation, you won't have the ability to master it. And that really blew me away, because I was of the mindset that I think a lot of us are, is stay up till 2 a.m. studying, wake up at 5 a.m., study some more. The more you study, the better you'll be. But now I realize through the research that without the sleep, you're wasting all of that extra effort. And that was really powerful information for me.
Right. The other thing, I didn't talk a lot about sleep trackers, and here's why. Just the commercially available sleep trackers are not. Oh, sorry, I just saw Aaron signed in. Hi, Aaron.
I'm doing that to him. He doesn't know I'm doing it, but.
Okay. The commercially available sleep trackers are not, it's kind of like the body fat scale that you have at home. So it's great to compare Monday's body fat to next Monday's body fat. But in terms of actual body fat, mine is like 10% higher on my scale at home. Same thing with the sleep tracker. Great to compare tonight's sleep to tomorrow night's sleep. But in terms of actual, I had a firefighter contact me who was very concerned because he's like, I'm not getting quality sleep. And I said, well, how do you feel? He says, I feel great. I said, okay, treat the patient, not the monitor. So just be really careful how much stock you put into those trackers, because the accuracy is, you know, suspect. What do you think, Aaron?
He's on mute. Unmute, friend.
Well, next time, tell me you're going to pull up my video, and then
I'm glad you brushed your hair.
Yeah, well, it's an art.
Good thing you weren't picking your nose when she pulled up your video.
I know, right? It's so good to see you.
I know, it's good to see you. I had to come all the way to a webinar in North Carolina to see you again.
I know. I was glad that she sent it to me. I can't wait for you to come to North Carolina in April.
I know, right? Hey, what questions do you have about sleep from the police perspective? Anything different?
I thought it was really, really great. One of the things that I've been tapping into, and Jacqueline really nailed some stuff, was going back and forth between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and getting into that. And I had never heard that term nidra before. And so I actually had looked her up and got in onto the Insight Timer. If you'd have logged in about 5 minutes earlier, I was actually looking at Jacqueline's stuff, trying to download one of the apps. So that's really interesting, just trying to, because like with me, I don't sleep, I get 6 hours of sleep. And if I try to do any more than that, and one of the things that I'm interested in, and if Jacqueline's husband, I'm sorry I didn't catch his name, if he's still on here, if I sleep more than 6 hours, man, I feel like I have a hangover, and I don't drink. I haven't drank in 30 years, right? And so it's just odd that, I've conditioned my body in some weird way that it doesn't matter when I fall asleep, it's 6 hours and I wake up. And if I sleep more than that, like if I'm out, working a hurricane or something, and I'm up for 24, 36, 48 hours, if I come home and sleep, the 9 to 10 hours where I think I'm catching up, I feel like I have a hangover, and it's actually worse than if I'd have just slept the 6 and got up. I just feel crappy all day long. So just kind of interested if you have any input on that.
Yeah, I could speak to that. A lot of times what happens when we sleep for a really long time and we wake up feeling wrecked has less to do with how much time we're spending sleeping and more to do with when we're waking up in the sleep cycle. So especially if it's daytime sleep and we're like catching up from a busy night, our body has more of a tendency to get inadvertently woken up during delta brainwave sleep, or the 4th stage of the sleep cycle. So what's happening is, even though you're getting more hours, you're waking up during your slowest brainwave activity in your deepest phase of sleep when your body's not ready for that. So essentially it's like trying to cold start a diesel engine in the dead of winter. It'll eventually turn over and start running, but it's not going to run optimally. Your body's the same way. If you sleep past that 6 hours, but you wake up during delta sleep, you're going to wake up feeling wrecked, physically and potentially mentally as well. You might be moodier. Your body might feel like it can't get going, headache, fatigue, all of that kind of comes from waking yourself up during that deep sleep. So if you're trying to catch up on sleep and you're going to sleep more than 6 hours, you're almost better off, instead of just letting yourself sleep until you wake up, is setting an alarm based on a 90-minute increment. And 90 minutes is because 90 minutes is the standard average that it takes to get through an entire round of the 5 stages of the sleep cycle. And then that will more likely wake you up at the end of REM, when your brainwave activity is picking up, your body, your physiological functions are increasing, your heart rate's coming back up, your respirations are coming back up, and you're primed to wake up feeling good.
So just extend it like 90 minutes past the 6 hours. So just set it for like 7 hours and then wake myself up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I do. So if you normally get 6, but you want a little more, exactly, set an alarm for 7.5 hours, and then see how your body reacts to that. See if you wake up feeling better compared to what you've experienced in the past, where you wake up feeling like it was more detrimental, and just see if that time's better to that natural sleep cycle.
I appreciate that. That's good stuff. So, but to your point, I don't know if it was, so cops, man, it all depends on where they're at in the state, right? So some of them work 12-hour shifts, some work 10, some work 8s. And so we do have some who are on permanent night shift, permanent day shift, permanent third shift. So, man, it's different for each and every one of them. And Dina, to your point, these guys that are on the 10-hour shifts, we're found ourselves like firemen. We have another career. As soon as we get off of that one, we go power washing, cutting grass, doing whatever it is, never getting any rest. So I think eventually it takes them to get like me, 52 years old, where you realize, man, I made a mistake. I should have been sleeping more. I should have been resting more. So.
Yeah, that's the sad thing about all of it. And I know, Annette, you deal with it, is everything that we've learned, about health, whether it's physical or mental, people are hesitant to implement it until it personally affects them. And I don't know how to get people to care, because I remember when I was in my 20s, I was like, man, I could sleep for 4 hours and feel really good. So why am I going to try to sleep more when I could do so much more in life? And it's everything. So.
Well, I think too, first responders have this extreme personality. We wouldn't be doing this job if we didn't have that personality. And so we're high performers, high drive, high go, go, go. We're also sympathetic nervous system driven. So we get off of a 24 or a 12-hour shift, and then we go ride our motorcycles and parachute and whatever, throw knives at each other, because that we live on the edge. That's what we do. But it's so important for our mental and physical health. We are literally killing ourselves with our sleep deprivation. And so, some people genetically are healthier than others, and they kind of skate the issues for a longer time. And some people start to realize the issues much earlier in their 20s and 30s. So I guess, like you said, kind of like when you go to the doctor and you get the bad EKG, it's a wake-up call. Ooh, better cut out the fried foods and start doing some cardio. Same thing, unfortunately.
The scariest thing that I learned with like Walker's book and the work was when he talked about your cancer fighting cells and then the cancer creating cells. One night of insufficient sleep, he said, was found to reduce your body of 70% of its cancer fighting cells. And then chronic poor sleep puts you into chronic inflammation, which basically you have the opposite of those cancer fighting cells. You have the cancer causing cells. And they did a study of rats, and that's where they really saw that happening. So that was enough to scare me straight and feel better about going home and sleeping a little bit.
The screenshot you sent me of your sleep last week was pristine. Good job.
I'm doing it. Well, I've been trying to get Captain Beck on one of our webinars for over a year now, and it took you to get him on, so I'm super stoked.
Congrats.
There's your secret.
That's my secret, so that's how we're gonna do it. Any final thoughts, guys? And I'll give you back your afternoon.
Nope, absolutely reach out with the contact slide. Again, best way to get me is on Instagram at FireSQFitness. And I really, really appreciate the time and the opportunity. And it was great to see you, Captain Beck.
Good. My name is Aaron. Man, and I really like how you drove home about the bang stuff. Guys, please stay away from these exercise drinks. I could show you trooper after trooper after trooper who looks like an Atlas bodybuilder, but their heart is wrecked because all they do is drink bang and all this other stuff. Not only does it affect your sleep, man, the caffeine, the sugars, the junk that's in there, man, just stop it. Just stop it.
What he said.
What he said. Hey, you know, and I know I said we're closing, but since you said that, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, he talked about caffeine and tactical use of caffeine. And basically what he said is, if you're drinking it all the time and your body's used to it, it's not going to do what it needs to do. Right. But if you limit yourself to only having like 2 cups of coffee a day, then when you need coffee, your body will respond to it. And I thought that was really powerful because I'm guilty of drinking too much coffee, but it was really powerful understanding that. And then another piece of it that I never quite understood about caffeine is, so throughout the day, your body builds adenosine, which is sleep drive. So from the minute you wake up, your body starts to build sleep drive. Caffeine works like Narcan works on opiates. It blocks the adenosine. So the half-life of caffeine is like 5 hours. So if you drink a cup of coffee late afternoon, it's going to be in your system till like 1 o'clock. So the chances of being able to go to sleep at 9 or 10 if you're having to work the next day are going to be harder. And then on top of that, once it wears off, you go from feeling okay to feeling really bad. So Kim Morris says, fantastic job, guys. So, all right, love y'all.
Great job, Annette.
Thank you. Have a great day.
See ya.